Hello.
Dan,
Hello.
that's not how we open the show.
We didn't discuss it. Hello and welcome to the Arrow Video live interview. We're going to be talking about Clapboard Jungle today. Sam and I are here with Justin McCONNELL, who will be joining us any second to talk about his documentary, which I believe is shortly out on physical media from Arrow.
Yes.
Sam.
And who are you? Who are you, Dan?
I'm Dan Martin, special effects artist, podcaster, and ill-prepared interviewer.
And you're joined, as ever, by your lovely co-host.
By my beautiful co-host.
And I'm a writer, I'm a director, and I'm incredibly excited to talk to Justin about what may well be my favourite release of the year by the end of the year. I think this is an astonishing disc. But before we do that, let's have a little look at the trailer.
Film is storytelling, and we love a good story.
Making movies is beautiful. Prepping them, raising the money, selling them is horrible.
I wanted to make films since I was very young, but who was I? And what chance do I really have? Okay, here it goes. I grew up dreaming of when I might get the big break. That moment I made a film that would break into the public consciousness in a way that my career would be set.
This is the hardest business, all aspects of this.
I think a lot of filmmakers think just get the golden ticket and then you're making movies, and that's not what it is.
I have to prove myself a lot harder.
The doors to getting your work seen are wide open now. The ability to make money off your work is what's much more difficult.
All these people are working alongside me as a team to recognize one vision that came out of here. I'm doing this.
To be successful as a filmmaker, you have to be a fucking masochist.
You know, and luck plays a large part.
If you are entering this business in order to be a rich or famous, you're in the wrong place.
They always take longer than anyone planned.
It's an organic thing, filmmaking, and you can't hold on to your original plan too tightly.
You can make a wonderful film and it never gets seen.
You really need people to believe in your project.
Time keeps passing and hope keeps going up and down like a roller coaster.
I used to look at life where I would think, this is the year for me. This is the year where I'm going to break out and my career is going to explode.
As a filmmaker, swimming is all there ever is. Forward to whatever that brings. You may fuck up along the way, you may never reach the top of the business, but as long as you keep trying, keep learning, keep striving, it has to be enough.
You know, there's hope out there. You just got to work and it'll pay off.
I think there's a lot of stories out there that haven't had the voice in the past.
Film and telling a story reminds us who we are, and that's never going away.
Amazing. Right, let's bring in the director of Clapboard Jungle, Justin McCONNELL.
Hello.
Hello, Justin.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
I'm gonna open with kind of a bit of a scene setter, because I do feel like this discussion is going to involve a little bit of inside baseball, because we all do kind of film stuff. Mm-hmm. But before we get to that, I just wanted to make it clear that this is a movie for people who aren't involved in making movies. You've very carefully structured it as a kind of underdog story so that all audiences can enjoy it. How do you feel when you watch the film? What kind of emotions do you have? This is your underdog story. This is your life kind of playing out.
I mean, it's a little surreal, and it's definitely. It's not that I have trouble watching it, but I think anybody who makes anything has trouble watching their own work. I'm obviously way too close to the film compared to anybody else who would ever watch it. The reality of it is I turned the camera on myself and self-Truman showed myself over like a 4 or 5 year period. And, looking back at all those sort of moments and sitting and watching the film is a little bit, you kind of step outside your own head for a bit and go, okay, what the hell did I do? It's kind of one of those things where I knew going into it that if I made it incorrectly, it could be perceived as this navel-gazy vanity project kind of thing. And I'm sure that a percentage of people, I knew going into it, a percentage of people would see it like that no matter what I did. So when I watch it myself, I'm almost like, okay, I'm pretty sure I got the honesty out of these situations. So I can accept it on that level. But on another level, even when I watch like Life Changer or any of my past stuff, you just kind of see the flaws. Like you see the stuff that you might have done differently if you had 6 months of putting it in a drawer and looking back at it and going, maybe I'd make that edit a little differently. But I'm overall pretty happy with it, and the response has been great for the most part. So it's two things. One, I'm proud of it. It was a lot of work. I didn't even know if I'd get it done at a certain point, and we're still not done the 8-episode series. We're still in post-production on that. So I'm still working on it. But then on the other side of things, it's almost like, yeah, okay, I can see how maybe this section could have been a little tightened up or something, like, just because every filmmaker, I think even painters and stuff probably look back on their painting from, a year ago and go, oh, okay, yeah, I could see how I, could have done something a little differently. I think that's just the nature of being a creative. If you're self-satisfied with your own work, it's never going to improve.
Yeah, and it's very hard to examine your own work. Watching your own film is like living in a house you've decorated. All you're going to see are the mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
The places where you have to compromise.
Case in point, the fucking wallpaper. I put that up behind me when I made Broken Mile because I wanted to make my own apartment, which was the set, visually more interesting. I was going for a Refn aesthetic, and I just left it up because it was too much of a pain in the ass to bring it down. So now everyone thinks I'm just insane. That's
3/4 wallpapered room.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a window next to it, but yeah.
Okay. As Sam said, this is a very accessible film for non-industry filmmakers. But I think that one of the things that's going to embed it in the culture of independent cinema, and that's going to make it a perennial favorite, is that it is also very enjoyable as someone watching it as someone who has been through that, who has come up through the independent film, and I think that there are a lot of people out there who will watch it and see it as quite a motivational film. Well, because you address that sort of fantasy of just like the big break, and you talk about the reality of it. But ultimately, it is a film in which you do kind of elevate throughout the time period.
Yeah, I go from nothing to being 3 rungs up the ladder and still nothing, but at the same time it's at least a little bit higher up on the ladder, I guess. The tricks.
Yeah. So I guess my first question is, do you remember the first time that you referred to yourself as a professional filmmaker?
Oh, fuck.
And then secondly, do you remember the first time you referred to yourself as a professional filmmaker and didn't feel like you were lying?
Oh, Jesus Christ. I still feel like I'm lying. I did not, I don't think I've ever referred to myself as a professional filmmaker. Like I've never in a sentence used the phrase, yes, I'm a professional filmmaker, because that feels very like I'm putting on airs or something. I just practice professionalism because I run a post-production company and I'm always dealing with clients. So I think it's more just the way I carry myself, or I write emails or talk to people. I'd rather let that speak for me than for me to bluntly call myself, I'm a professional filmmaker. Because honestly, I mean, I still have a great degree of imposter syndrome, as I'm sure most anybody would in this business, because you're one project away from not doing something for 5 years, at times. So I don't think I've ever called myself a professional filmmaker. But the first time I thought I was a filmmaker was probably when I was a teenager making short films and stuff, and building air pressure squibs with a garden hose to blow the back of my sister's back out with a rifle shot or something like that. Like the moment I started actually making movies is when I was like, yep, I'm a filmmaker, because I think that's the mindset you need to have.
Yeah,
ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's fully justifiable. I think the line between amateur and professional, especially these days, is kind of ephemeral.
Yeah. I don't think there's there's one line and you step across and it's like, oh, I'm a professional now. And I think a lot of professionalism, or at least the outside perception of professionalism comes from other people's opinion of you and other people's opinion of your work. So one person may say, well, all his stuff looks like cheap shit. And then someone else might say, no, it's pretty polished. You know, you put 10 people into a room, they're all going to have a different opinion. So let them figure that out. And I'm just going to keep doing the work and hope, try the hardest I can to make it good.
But yeah, like from the perspective of kind of people who have made stuff, what's wonderful about this documentary is mixed in with all of the kind of raw honesty is genuine, proper wisdom, like stuff that is genuinely helpful to people. Because sometimes these documentaries, it's almost like people were kind of infected by your honesty, Justin, because everyone is just so kind of to the point, blunt. This is how it is, and speaking from experience, that is exactly how it is. So as a kind of documentary, it's incredible. What were some of the kind of lessons or pieces of insight that you learned from your talking heads that you didn't actually already know from experience? Like, what did you learn from making this film?
That's always a loaded question, because I did about 120 interviews and everyone ranged from 20 minutes to 90 minutes. So it's almost like making the film itself was like a crash course film school from the best teachers I possibly could have hoped for. So narrowing down to just a few things I learned is difficult. But I would say one of the things that I found most important was the idea of taking time with your ideas and letting them develop properly. And not rushing things to market before they're ready, but also at the same time realizing that, you know, a film, that saying is true, that a film is never finished, it's abandoned. You know, you could spend the rest of your life thinking of things you could do differently, but at a certain point, the film's got to get finished and it's got to get out to the world so that you can move on to the next thing and move on to the next thing and, you know, build up like that. A lot of people spoke like that, but I think one of the big ones is like even the largest names I talk to, they still have the same frustrations of trying to get things made and lots of projects that lived in their head that never actually made it to screen. And all that kind of thing really grounds you, because you realize that, like, so if I take 30 swings and one connects, those other 29 weren't wasted time. I had to take those 30 swings so one would connect. Although probably the real numbers are more like 1 in fucking 400 or something. But it depends on who you are too and where you're coming from and what work you've got behind you. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but that was a really important sort of thing to understand is that, you know, it is a long game ultimately. And even people who you think are, you know, they've got it set and they've got it made, they've got dream projects they've been trying to get made for 30 years. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that sort of thing is pretty important. And other than that, I mean, I just think one of the questions I asked almost everybody is, what's some advice that you can give new filmmakers starting out? That was like one question that almost everybody was universally answered. And they all said different things. But a few things that really stood out on that was if you're trying to work in this business, it's not a great idea that your reputation precedes you to the point where the person you're taking a meeting with already knows you've torn apart their past work. That's a really important one, because like if you're sitting with somebody you're pitching to and they've on social media, you know that you've fucking shredded their last film, you're probably not getting the job, or they're probably not going to finance you or whatever else. And that's one that like managers would tell me in interviews and things like that. That stuff's really important. But I think it's really just, you never know if the person you stepped on is going to be the person in power in 10 years. So don't step on people. Try not to. I could go on forever with this answer. There's a lot that was learned. There's a lot of that in the 5 hours of extended interviews that are on the Aero Player and on the Blu-ray. And there will be a lot of that in the 8-episode educational series as well, because that series is a traditional kind of talking heads series where every episode is a specific topic on the film business. My story's not even in it. And it's basically like a film school in a box over 8 episodes and that kind of thing. So there's lots of that advice will actually make it out to people to watch by the end of the year.
Right.
I'm just going to go back to the heavy hitters that you spoke to. Who are you most intimidated by when you were doing your interviews?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I mean, Del Toro to an extent, just because if you're in a room with Del Toro, like, or at least that day anyway, every 2 minutes has got his cell phone in his hand going, you got to call from Japan, you got to call from whatever. So even for him to take the 15 minutes or so to sit down and actually do an interview, there was always this sort of looming sense of pressure. Like, his time is really valuable. I'm very lucky to be getting this, but like, he's probably got a million other things he could be doing right now. So it was more of just like, okay, well, let's hope I can get what I can get in the short period of time I've got with him. But luckily, that was also the same day that I shot, and when Del Toro met Romero Arrow bonus feature, I shot that the same day I shot the Del Toro interview in Romero's apartment. So it was sort of just tacked on the end of that day. So it was they had already been talking for an hour, so he was already sort of relaxed and into the conversation already. So it wasn't so bad. In terms of like intimidating, though, I don't think any of them were particularly intimidating to me. Some of them were like a couple managers I interviewed, for example. You got to go to their offices in LA and get buzzed in through multiple desks and then wait for them for a while to show up and then set up all the gear and all that sort of thing. The actual process of getting those interviews was a little daunting, but ultimately everybody was pretty relaxed. I was more intimidated by some filmmakers that I like asked and got a tentative yes and then got a no in person. That happened a couple times, which was frustrating. They'll remain nameless. But ultimately, yeah, I didn't really have much. I have this ability, I think, now that I've done so many of these interviews, to kind of like detach myself from the person I'm sitting across from and just ask the questions, and then afterwards go, "Oh my God," I think that even stems back to my first documentary, Working Class Rockstar, because I was such a fan of people like Devin Townsend or Randy Blythe from Lamb of God, or people from Dave Brocky from Gwar and stuff like that. So interviewing them and starting to meet my idols, I guess, in the early 2000s, you start to at least try to build a mental buffer between what the job that needs to be done and the inner fanboy going, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." So I don't think anybody was particularly intimidating. Tom Holland to a degree, but not for a bad reason. It's just because I had to drive up this massive hill in LA to his mansion that Chucky built. And it was just like, my God, this place is fucking huge kind of thing.
You mentioned Working Class Rockstar. Obviously, that's on the disc. There are 2 feature-length documentaries on this disc, which is another kind of insane extra on top of the 5 hours of interviews. I really enjoyed Working Class Rockstar, and it's really interesting in the context of this discussion. Mm-hmm. It feels like movies are going where music went. These big companies are kind of phasing out physical releases and kind of moving over to streaming.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you learned making Working Class Rockstar that you feel applies to filmmakers? Are there any kind of warning signs there, do you think?
Well, I just think the moment the internet decentralized the distribution system for music, it did the exact same thing for film. So the moment that internet got fast enough that you can download a high quality 1080 rip in like 90 seconds, and I'm not talking about piracy specifically here. I'm talking about rentals and streaming and whatever else. I think that sort of just let the genie out of the bottle the exact same way the record industry did. So now instead of a pay per unit model where people are specifically renting your film, they're paying for a subscription to a site that's paying pennies on the dollar compared to that pay per unit model. So now we've got Spotify for music, and we've got every streaming service on the planet for film. And like a good example is like for an independent filmmaker with a film on Amazon Prime, not a Prime original where they paid like an MG, like a flat fee for the film, but like just on Prime, as in your distributors put it up or you put it up there yourself, because you can put things on Prime yourself. They're getting more restrictive, but you just need a Prime Video Direct account. They're only paying 1 cent per 1 hour of streamed content. So if somebody watches your entire 90-minute movie, you've just made 1.5 cents. So you need volume. You need so many people to watch it to make money on a platform like that. That it really does hurt the bottom line of a film, because as soon as it's on Prime, nobody's going to pay $4 to rent it because they can stream it with their Prime account that they've already got. So I do think that reflects, because back when I shot Working Class Rockstar, which was between 2004 and 2006, the interviews I got then seemed like they were prophetic. Now, if you were to watch that documentary, it's almost like, oh, well, that's quaint. I mean, that happened 12 years ago. Like, it's a joke now, because that's just where things went. But I think we're in a place right now where the music industry was in the mid 2000s to late 2000s, where it's anybody's game. It's the Wild West out there, and some people are going to sink and some people are going to swim. And I think the people that swim, the people that stay afloat, are the ones who stay on top of the trends, and ultimately just realize that the old way of doing things works to an extent, but you really do have to. I hate the phrase "think outside the box." It's such a cliche, but it's true. You almost have to keep your finger on the pulse and then hope for the best. Hope that you'll be able to get on the right wave of something to be able to make money off your work.
Yeah, and it's why, and I'm not saying this to be a shill, and I haven't been told to say this, but it's why it is important to support places like Arrow Player, because the kind of films that we make could very easily be frozen out in this new world.
Yeah.
But Arrow Player is supporting that kind of work. So, that's my sales pitch over for the moment. Dan, you've got the next question.
Yeah, well, so obviously Del Toro talked about his disdain for terms like content and pipeline and so on. But when you were discussing, that when you were answering Sam's questions a second ago, you talked about, responding to the wants of the audience and so on, and starting to consider not just the stories you need to tell, but also the stories people want to see. Post specifically Life Changer, do you think the fact that got that it's the most successful non-fiction release, has that changed in any way the way you approach your future non-fiction projects?
Yeah, because Life Changer was successful in a relative kind of way. Like it did pretty well with critics. I did lots of festivals with it. It sold all over the world. It's still selling all over the world. I think we just sold it to India last week. It's still sort of rolling out there, which is great. But if the next one I have to structure in a way where because you don't want to burn your investors. You don't. The worst thing you could do. Well, the worst thing you could do is lose all their money. But if you just break even, they're not going to be super into immediately moving forward with the next one. You want a hit, and hits are very hard to come by, and you can't predict them. But you can do certain things to structure the film in a way where you can at least hedge your bets a bit and put enough ammo into it that the market will respond to it in a way that really breaks out. The horror movies that you see really do well, the South by Southwest darlings and the stuff that, like Psycho Goreman's a great example of a movie that, I probably don't have a Psycho Goreman in me because it's just not my aesthetic, but I like Steve's a great guy and he's a fucking talented as hell filmmaker. And he's found this sort of niche that really speaks to a large audience to the point where people are just salivating for his next work, which is great. Absolutely. The kind of thing you want to happen. I think for me, it's going to be pointing my projects in a direction where I'm able to work with the sort of niche I'm already building myself, and also deliver something that the public on a wider scale will respond to. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, kowtowing to what's popular, because chasing trends never works. By the time, like if zombie movies, as an example, are popular right now, they're not going to be by the time you got your movie made. I mean, well, zombies is a bad example because they're kind of, for sales at least, they're kind of tried and true. Like you can make a $40,000 zombie movie and probably make your money back in today's market.
Perennial.
Yeah. But whatever it is, let's say Bigfoot, right? Bigfoot's popular right now, or werewolves, right? We're in a werewolf renaissance to some degree. So if you right now decided, okay, I'm going to make a werewolf movie, and then in 6 months you get it to camera, and then in another 6 to 8 months it gets released, you've missed the werewolf wave. So it's not, for me, it's not going to be about chasing a trend, but trying to come up with a project that I think will speak to what I want to see, and hopefully what will mean is that other people will want to see it too. I mean, everybody's different. Everybody has different opinions on everything. but at least if you could figure out something where you know that there's an audience for it in some way that helps you a lot. And once your budgets go up, like we've got Mark of Cain right now, which we're trying to remount for this summer now that Australia's basically COVID free and stuff like that. That's a significantly higher budget movie than anything I've done. I'm not directing it. I'm co-writing and producing it with a team, but casting's really important once those budgets go up. You need a lead actor that people are going to go, oh yeah, I'll definitely watch the new movie with that person in it. So, and that sort of helps secure you in the eyes of the sales agents and in the eyes of the international buyers, because they bought the last 3 movies that guy was in. So the sales agent can go to them and go, well, here's the new one. I think it really just depends. You have to be realistic about your budget, and then realistic about what the chances are for a film in that budget range to do any kind of revenue return at all, any kind of return at all, just by looking at what else is out there and see what's broken out. And high concept stuff does work, but it's got to be the right high concept. Like, it's got to be the right idea where people know what it is right away and go, I got to see that. I haven't seen a movie like that before. Like, new ideas really do work, provided they're packaged in a way and sold in a way where people find them appealing.
Well, that's I guess that. Sorry, Sam.
No, go on, Dan.
I was going to say, I guess that's where the synergy of your, like, whoever's going to distribute your film and you coming together work, because your stuff is traditionally, your non-fiction stuff is high concept. Do you see what I see? Life Changer. They all turn on a quite a unique concept, right, but it's one that you have to be on board on from the beginning. And you had,
but at the same time, like when setting up. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say setting up Life Changer. When setting up Life Changer and pitching it and stuff, the majority of the companies want to know, okay, what are the set pieces? What's the gore? What are the things that grab people? And we had this line, it's The Thing meets American Psycho, from the perspective of the monster or something like that. And that's not particularly accurate to the film, but it's enough to get people to bite, to some degree. And then the nitty gritty of the story and the actual subtext and stuff, a lot of the buyers don't really care about. It's more about, what are the sellable items that are in this that we can package together in a trailer and with a poster and get out to the market, and that will communicate to a buyer in Japan or communicate to a buyer in Poland or something. This is what the film is. People are going to want to watch this. So it's almost like if you have subversive ideas or concepts or fresh and new ideas, you still have to sort of fit it into something where there are clear sellable elements that the money people and the sellers and the distributors and stuff have something to work with. It becomes difficult. And do you see what I see? Our feature version that we're working on right now, I don't think is going to be a problem to sell at all once it's actually done, because we took this little slasher short that we did. We took the idea of the last minute and we expanded it into this massive survival action horror movie with a huge body count and just so much variety to what the actual film is compared to the short that I know it's going to work in my own head. I'm pretty sure of it. And the team around us seems to think it's going to work. It's just getting that first money to kind of come to the table and be like, okay, yep. Because the first money is always the first domino. So we're sort of in that position right now where we've got big percentage of the budget, provided we can get a little percentage of the budget first, which is most things.
Yeah, and just in case there's anyone watching this who does want to chase trends, I got a kind of amazing piece of advice from the producer of a very successful British director. Can't name either of them because I'm not sure if they want it out there that this is how this person works. But very successful British director who just has a stack of scripts at all times, has 10 scripts ready to go, each with a different kind of trend. And then as soon as it's time for that thing to come around, because all these things come around in waves, right? As soon as that thing's ready to go, he's got a script ready to go.
Yeah, it's the shotgun approach, right? Every pellet is something, and I've got a slate of, I think, 15 feature films. I'm not the writer or director on all of them, but my company has a slate of about 15 feature films and 2 TV series right now, so that I have a menu, because every time you take a meeting with someone, it's rarely here's the movie I want to, well, Travis says it right in the movie, you know, here's the movie I want to make. And then they go, oh, wow. It's more like, well, we're looking for this, this, and this right now. And you go, okay, I think I have a project that fits this one. It's a little different, but we can market it in this way. And that will fit the slot you're looking for. Because most of the time the companies already have a clear idea of what they're looking for because they know what the buyers are hungry for. And I know how cynical that sounds. It does suck to some degree, but that's why having a slate of a variety of things, I think, will help you more ultimately. At least that's how a lot of people get things made.
And also, everyone watching, we are going to be taking kind of audience questions. We probably should have mentioned that before. So yeah, do put them in the chat, and we'll ask them towards the end. Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, exactly. You need a well-stocked pantry to be able to go to when people say, okay, well, this isn't for us, but what else have you got? Yeah. Then, you know, being able to draw from that is a big deal. Just as a note to our would-be writers and filmmakers out there at the moment chasing current trends, werewolf movies are innately expensive. Stop writing werewolf movies. Like, I love werewolf movies. I want more werewolf movies. But they're not your first film. Well, like
a good werewolf suit alone is like, well, I mean, you could probably get it done cheaper, but from the average effect shop, you're looking anywhere between $5,000 and $20,000 for just the suit.
Yeah.
So
hair is expensive.
Yeah, punching hair, and it's time consuming as fuck. You got to punch it in individually. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Sam. Go.
I absolutely love this film, and when I got to the end of it, I immediately wanted a sequel set in the already new landscape of post-COVID.
Yeah.
But that is kind of provided on the disc to a certain extent. The kind of guest chat commentary that you've got on there does address a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
But would you ever think about doing a sequel to this, covering the kind of brave new world that we're all in?
If I do, it's not going to be for a while because I don't think the dust is going to settle on our brave new world for a decade. If I made a movie this year, it would be out of date, in 6 months. Because I don't think anyone really knows what's going to happen once this is all over, whatever it is. Plus, there's going to be whatever new crisis comes up after it because we're facing down climate change, and there's probably going to be a worse bug at some point in our future too. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to be cynical, but these things are likely happen at some point, and you just can't predict when. So the business is going to have to survive through a lot of different changes. But even now, with how much more comfortable people are with like streaming at home or premium releases of theatrical movies that you can sit on your couch and watch on opening day and stuff like that, that's going to have a real ripple effect. That's really going to change things. And if those bigger films are now more streaming launches more often, that really puts a lot of competition against the indie films that took that space before. And there's already so many films being released every month that it's impossible to keep up with anything anyway, or TV series or whatever else. Or if you're a gamer, it's like, what do you choose? Ultimately, sure. I mean, I maybe at some point in the future I would do that. The TV series that we're currently in post-production on is addressing some of that toward the last few episodes as well. And then there's the question of representation and fairness and equality across the business, and that'll also be addressed more in the series and stuff as well. But at the same time, I don't think that old William Goldman quote, nobody knows, I'm gonna have to paraphrase this because I fucking forget. Nobody knows anything, basically. Is particularly true now because I don't think anybody really knows where things are going to land. They're just kind of flying blind and hoping that something catches. But ultimately, I'd do another one. It's entirely possible. I could see this continually wanting to interview people. I interviewed Gary Sherman last fall, and his part of his interview's on the disc, but like that was for the TV series, and I just ended up, because he's not in the film, I interviewed him once the film was released. I'm going to interview 3 or 4 new people before the series is done being edited. So it's kind of like one of those things where, because the information's constantly shifting, I'll try and keep updated material coming out. There's definitely room for additional stuff. I just don't know yet because I have some narrative film priorities I want to get out of the way. And I signed on to direct a new documentary based on the book They Came From Within about the history of Canadian horror. So I'll be working on that later this year once we're done the series. So I've got other projects I want to do first, and then maybe I'll revisit once we know more, you know. But at the same time, it just ends up being a time capsule to some degree too, right? Yeah. Because by the time you get it out, you know, it's not that the information is old. There's things you can take from it that will apply to you, but it's not like you can be up to the day with a documentary film necessarily. You can do that with YouTube videos, but then, you know, in 3 months they're aged as well. So
yeah. Dan.
Oh, me. I mean, I was.
Are you frozen?
Oh, did I disappear for a second there?
Yeah, he's moving. He's moving. Sort of.
I was going to ask if there was anything that you have learned since that you wish could have been part of the documentary, like in the work on the TV series, the subsequent documentaries you've done. Has there been anything that you felt was relevant to the stuff that's specifically in the documentary, like an adjunct or a contradiction or a reinforcement that you wish you could have included in that edit?
I think it'd be kind of interesting to have like an epilogue dealing with the release of the documentary itself, just like how that came together and the role of all that. Because on a meta level, you know, the making of the documentary could also be folded into the story of Clapboard Jungle as well. I mean, I did actually shoot stuff all the way to do with that, and we shot our entire crowdfunding campaign from 2015 and all that stuff. I think there'd be something to be learned from that, but it was just another level of story that just seemed to, it would pull focus away from the skeleton that was built to sort of deliver the information. Because the way the movie was structured and the way it was intended to be structured, and we sort of figured this out between Kevin Burke, who's my editor on it, and myself as we were cutting it, and Daryl Shaw, the co-producer, was the skeleton is my arc, my story of whatever happened. And then we were able to put sections of themed information referencing what's going on in my story, so that it has a sort of a clean sort of story that also informs you on different aspects of the film industry and that sort of thing. There was a review Austin Chronicle did where they were talking about how I'm like Goofy in those old PSA cartoons where it's like Goofy learns to play baseball and he fucks up, and then somebody comes in and goes, really, Goofy, you got to do it this way. I thought that was pretty accurate to how I structured the film, because I fuck up a lot on screen. And you know, I've had people comment like, he clearly doesn't know what he's doing, and it's like, that's kind of the point. It's an educational exercise. It's meant to be like, okay, I made a mistake. Now, why did I make that mistake? And then the talking heads reinforce what I should have done or what I can learn from that. That's kind of the way the film is structured. So yeah, I definitely the idea of adding that added layer of meta of like the making of the documentary while I'm making everything else would be an interesting sort of through line. And there is stuff that I was under an NDA, so I couldn't talk about. Like I spent a couple of months writing on a certain horror remake that they went in a different direction. The movie didn't turn out amazing, but I can't talk about what it is. But that was all on camera too, but I couldn't use it. So there's definitely stuff that would have been cool, but I just ultimately didn't make it into the film.
But here's the thing, like, as you said, the William Goldman quote, like, no one knows what they're doing in this fucking industry, because the rules change constantly, even if there are any rules to start with. And so much of it kind of depends on luck. And as you talk about it on the disc, the idea that you can be working on one project and really, like, you know, rolling the rock up the hill, and then out of nowhere, something completely random, you know, you get a call and something completely different happens. And it's what I absolutely love about this documentary, the fact that you are so honest and so real. And I think that's what's going to help people the most. It's what people are going to really identify with, I think. It certainly was the case for me. Like, I so vividly remember the first time I watched this film, because I saw it just ahead of Fright Fest last year. And I'd made my second film, Little More Flesh, and I was struggling to get distribution for it, even though it was kind of well reviewed and all that kind of stuff. And my kind of step up project, the first kind of non-DIY project I was going to do, got cancelled because of the pandemic, obviously. And then I had to move because of the pandemic, all this stuff. Anyway, I'd basically given up I was like, I'm never going to make another film again. Like, I've made something good. No one wants it. My voice isn't, for the people or whatever, in distribution. But then I watched your film, and by the end of it, I was punching the air and saying, I've got to carry on. Justin struggled, and look what happened to him. And so I ended up making a lockdown movie, and it's the best reviewed film I've made so far. So literally, your documentary changed my life. And I hope that has a similar impact on other people, because we need honesty in order to find our own way through this insane industry.
I don't know what to say to that. That's a heavy emotional pill. First of all, I'm sorry. No, I'm kidding. I'm glad that it gave you that, or that at least it was a part of giving you that I guess kick in the ass to keep going. Yeah. But the reality of it is, I think you would have kept going anyway. I've had so many down moments where I wanted to quit, or I felt like I wanted to quit, and I just sort of, I don't think I could do anything else. Like, I have done other things. There are jobs I can do if I wanted to pack it in and do a day job, and only a day job kind of thing. But I don't think, like, I'm not wired to dream about anything else or to want anything else. I've been wanting to do this for so long that I just, like, I don't think I could give up if I wanted to, ultimately. And I think there's a bit of insanity in that. And I think I even put that in my voiceover in the movie. But I think you would have pushed forward anyway. But I'm glad you said that. I just picture you punching the air and knocking it like a resonator fish, like in the other dimension or something like that. It's just like punching one of those From Beyond fish in the face and not knowing it. But anyway, thanks, man. I do hope. I kind of made the movie as a litmus test in a way, in that for younger filmmakers, in that I'm expecting two types of people to watch it. Well, lots of types of people, but two types of younger filmmakers will watch it. The type who watch it and go, fuck that shit, I'm not doing that. And then they know deep down, like, okay, this isn't for me. I'm not getting into film. And then the people who watch it and go, okay, this is difficult, but I think I can do this. I want to do this. Nobody's going to say no to me. I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm just going to do it. And then they've got their own sort of guiding light too, of like, I'm going to do this sort of thing. I mean, it's not the be all and the end all or anything, but the point was to just make something that gives people some kind of a fundamentals or a foundation, and also on an esoteric level and an emotional level, a foundation of where it can sort of bring you when shit falls apart. I remember 2011, I had a national release of my film, The Collapsed, which was a movie that I shot for $40,000 up front to get it to the point where we had a shoppable screener. Then we sold it to Japan, and that paid for enough to cover the sound mix, stuff like that. It's this post-apocalyptic movie. It's not, I don't want to say it's not very good, but there would be a million things I'd do differently if I made it now. It was written way too fast. We went to camera way too fast. We casted too fast. It wasn't well developed. I do think it has its strengths. I think it's got a lot of weaknesses, but it came out nationally across Canada in a bunch of theaters, and it was reviewed by every national paper in the country in 2011. And all but one of those reviews were fucking terrible, to the point where the night before it released, I was like, I should just give up. There's no point. If everybody hates the stuff I do, but then you start, and maybe it's self-delusion. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure somebody watching thinks I'm delusional. Probably more than one person. But the point is that I was able to sort of rationalize that, like, okay, yeah, but you just opened up against the first Thor and a bunch of these studio movies that cost $100 million. Your movie cost $40,000. You made $0 on it. And the fact that it even looks half decent and got a national theatrical release is something that a lot of those movies never happens for. So just work harder on the next one and make a better movie next time. And that was kind of my driving force from that point, was like, people are going to tear your shit apart no matter what. And the more people that see your stuff, the more I would liken it to the virus. The more people are exposed to your work, the more chance you have of getting infected by people that hate your shit. And that's entirely okay. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. But I think it's important to realize that, you probably are building an audience of people who like your stuff too. And the people who hate it are going to be in your head louder because you hate the mistakes you make too, right? Like I remember I showed Clapboard Jungle to my best friend Chris Murch, one of my best friends, Chris Murch, and he watched it and he sent me like a message. He's like, LOL. He's like, I didn't realize I didn't have to hate films because all the filmmakers hate themselves. and I think there is a bit of truth to that. Like if you're not self-analyzing and trying to do better, then you're not going to improve. And some people are geniuses out of the gate, and fine, more power to them. But for everybody else, I think a little bit of healthy self-doubt is warranted.
Well, you know what they call a genius who doesn't hate himself? A terrible collaborator.
Yeah, there's truth to that too. But, yeah, collaboration is so important with the film business, especially because the money people, the distributors, everybody involved in your project, unless you're making it in a bubble, like by yourself or with a small team, and you can just protect that vision, that usually means your movie's tiny. Everybody's going to have a say in what they want, and all those notes are going to be conflicting. So like there's a thing like Life Changers in the first cut was like 117 minutes, and then the cut I screened for a test audience was 104 minutes, and the final film is like 84 minutes. So that's a lot of notes that got me to that point, right? And I'm not saying that I took every note,
babies, yeah,
but like I knocked almost 40 minutes out of that movie, and then some of the reviews come out and it's like, well, this moves too fast. It's like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. But that was like 2 reviews out of 110. The point being is that, you're going to get hit on every side, whether it's a test audience or just friends or the people paying for the movie or whatever. There's always going to be a bunch of notes, and there's always going to be a lot of different opinions on things, and you have to sort of address them while also keeping true to your gut feeling. And that can be a very difficult process. It can be incredibly frustrating. So being able to self-analyze and go, okay, maybe I am wrong about this, I think is really important too. But I will say there is a film that just came out that was made in that very bubble kind of way that is incredible and looks way bigger, and that's Come True, the Anthony Scott Burns movie. He made that for like very little money with a crew of like 5 people over a period of like 60 days or something, which is a crazy shoot schedule for an indie film. But it was because he had such a tiny crew and such a dedicated cast. And the movie turned out great. And it's very rare to be able to make something so controlled without having to be beholden to investors to the point where it's like, you can't make this decision. It's we don't get it. Life Changer was a movie that a lot of people just didn't get, and I'm sure there are people who still don't get it. Well, I know that, but whatever, as long you don't, the biggest mistake you can make is trying to appeal to everybody, because then you'll appeal to nobody.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's the path to middle of the road.
Yeah.
And right, I've got one more question, and we'll move on to some audience questions, because there's some great ones in there. But yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about the kind of little bit more about the talking heads, because it's a diverse range of voices that you have on the documentary. I
wish I had got more though. Like I was actively trying to get more diversity into the film, more representation, and it just didn't work out as much as I wanted it, but I'm trying to remedy that now for the series to some degree.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. But there are voices in there, and a lot of the most interesting points come from those people. What was the selection process like? How did you find these people, and what were those conversations like?
It really depended, but a lot of it was just access and timing. Because I would be going to a market, or I'd be going to a festival or a convention, or, a trip to LA to shop projects around or something. And it really became about, okay, who do I know that's going to be there? How am I going to get access to them? Do I have access to them? And how do I approach them? And what's the most efficient and convenient way where I'm not taking a bunch of their time and I'm not being a pain in the ass, so they'll actually say yes. And especially with a lot of the bigger talent, if my pitch is, I've got all these people in the film already, it's just going to be me and a camera. There's not going to be a crew. We're not even going to light. We're going to do it in natural lighting, and I'll be in and out in half an hour. That's a way easier yes than I need 2 hours of your time. We've got a 4-person crew. We need to pre-light the whole thing. We need to put you in front of a backdrop. Like if that was the approach, I would have got a lot more no's. But because I approached in a way where it's like, hey, we're both at this convention, or both at this market, or we're both at this festival, or hey, I'm going to be in LA. Can I drive to your place for a half an hour, or something like whatever it happens to be? I think that approach certainly helped a lot. but it was also a bit of a snowball effect. So when for example, one of the earlier interviews I got was John McNaughton, and I was super surprised he even said yes. I got that during Fantasia when he was there with his film The Harvest, and I'd already met him during a rooftop session at Frontiers because he had another project in Frontiers, I think Carney Kill it was called. It was a horror movie set in a carnival, which I'd still love to get made, or love to see him get made. Once I had John McNaughton, and then Tom Savini was early as well, Sid Haig was early as well. Once I was able to put their sort of names in emails reaching out to other people, it became a lot easier for other people to go, oh, if they're in the movie, then yeah, why not? I'll do the interview. And certain things like Paul Schrader, I kind of met originally 15 years ago because his son and I are old friends. We met through the band Dog Fashion Disco, which were a client of mine for years in the early 2000s. And then Dog Fashion Disco ended up scoring the end of Dominion prequel to The Exorcist that Paul Schrader directed when Morgan Creek threw him a bone and let him finish the movie. So I was in studio during those scoring sessions with Paul and everyone. So it was way easier to approach someone like that because it was already sort of a pre-established, he knew who I was at least. But other people, it was just like luck sometimes. It would be like, well, I'm going to be here, they're going to be here, let's reach out. And then when it came to representation, I actively sought people out. There were certain people that I would have loved to get into the film, but I just didn't get a yes from. But usually that was because of schedule. That was usually because I was like, I'm in LA for 4 days, they're in Georgia on The Walking Dead, or I'm in LA for 4 days, but they're busy doing X, whatever it happens to be. So I definitely tried very hard to get as many people as I could. But not checking off boxes either. It was just like, who would have an interesting story to tell or an interesting perspective, and I reached out to so many people that I'm just lucky I got the 120 or so that I did. I could ramble on about this forever, but basically it was just an organic process of opportunity, time, and luck, and the rest sort of followed after that. And I owe Chris Alexander a big debt of gratitude too. He's an associate producer on the film. He was the former editor of Fangoria, former editor of Rue Morgue, and he already knew George Romero and Tom Savini and a bunch of like Charles Band and people like that. So he was able to help me set up those interviews. So big thanks to Chris there.
I've got to say quickly before we move on, there's a moment in the Paul Schrader interview in the 5 hours of interviews where he talks about the rules and different people's attitudes to the rules. I'm not going to spoil it because I think people should watch it on the disc, but that blew my mind. I don't know if you can talk about how you felt hearing that without kind of spoiling it, so people do watch it on the disc. But
well, how would I talk about it without spoiling it?
Just his knowledge of film history in general. Like he's, I've never met him, I've never interviewed him, but
he's incredibly knowledgeable. But I also think for somebody who is in his twilight years, he actively he gets in trouble for this on Facebook relatively often, but he actively really wants to understand. I can tell he really wants to understand the sort of rules of decorum and how he's supposed to operate as a person in this current sort of society we have just as a person. But when it comes to the film industry and the way he talks about it, I think he's got some of the more progressive views in terms of where we are in the film industry and what constitutes a film even. Compared to a lot of people way even younger, he's his finger's pretty on the pulse on the idea that I'll spoil this out of the pilot episode of the Clapboard Jungle series, but there's a section where he talks about how to him a movie or Mad Men or a dog video on YouTube, they're all movies. And he goes on about how they're all grabbing the attention of a viewer, and what's the difference really? Ultimately, they're all a form of entertainment, a visual entertainment that is taking time out of your day to watch. If you spend hours scrolling cat videos, yes, there's no narrative structure or whatever it is, but that's still competition for somebody who's put 5 years of their life into writing some kind of a masterpiece. You're still choosing between those two things, and I think. I think I can't 100% remember what you're referring to about what Paul said, except for the idea that younger filmmakers coming up have very little or seldomly have any real basis in film history and the structure of how film traditionally was made, or any. this is an assumption, right? There's probably lots of people coming up in film, younger people who do dive into the history of film and understand where certain things came from.
Mm-hmm.
But that's less and less and less people now. You know, it's much more of a grassroots kind of approach to learning how to make material now and learning how to create content and stuff like that. You know, it's tutorials online. It's just doing it because we have the gear. Let's experiment it, and that's going to create a whole new language of film. It already is. You know, TikTok, the editing on TikTok is a new language. It's a new storytelling language, and you know, I guess that comes from Vine and stuff in the past, but that's a new language. It's a new approach to how you present visual media that wasn't done like that before TikTok. So yeah. So,
I am gonna quickly spoil it because there's plenty more to recommend on the disc, and I don't actually want people to think that Schrader was talking down to the current generation.
No, not at all.
Because what he says is, you know, in the early days of cinema, they established the rules. Then his generation came along and broke the rules. Then Tarantino's generation laughed at the rules. And now we're in a situation where the kind of modern generation don't know what the rules are. And I don't, that's criticizing them because there's a trajectory there. You know, everything's been torn up and put together so much that, you know, anything goes basically. And I just thought that was kind of an amazing perspective.
But out of that, something new is going to get created, right? Like I think we have to respect the past while being open to whatever the future brings, ultimately.
Exactly, absolutely. Right, Dan, do you want to move over to the old audience questions? I'll shut up.
Well, like I was going to say, it's like
yeah, there's a slipcase, Kev Hurst.
There you go. Beautiful. Yeah, like what it's like you were saying, you know, the rules are like everything else in film. You've got to keep moving forwards. Nothing's set in stone. If you try and make what is appropriate right now, appropriate's a loaded word. If you try and make what is demanded right now, then you're going to be out of date by the time your film hits the shelves, if it hits the shelves. A lot of the questions we're getting in are about the nightmare that is securing finance.
Okay, yeah.
For pictures, and asking for advice on that is probably it's difficult to answer, because if you knew, why would you share that?
Well, no, I don't think. The problem is I don't think there is one answer to share. There's a million answers to share. But ultimately, if you think of it like a puzzle, like a big puzzle, and you think of where you live. So if you're an American, for example, the majority of American finance comes from, if you're in a specific state with a tax rebate, let's say Georgia or something. I don't know the exact rate, but let's say for the sake of argument, and you live in Georgia, or you want to produce something in Georgia, and their tax rate is 25%. I don't actually know their tax rate. Maybe it's higher. I don't know because I haven't looked into it. But let's say their tax rate is 25%, which means for every dollar you spend in Georgia, you get 25 cents on the dollar, so 25% of your money back. Well, technically, you now have 25% of your budget, but you only have that 25% of your budget if you're able to put together the remaining 75% of your budget, because it's a rebate. You have to be able to make the movie and then file for that rebate to get that money back. They're not going to give it to you up front. So you're looking for your first money. Now, your first money in the United States, Britain, UK, and Canada are different because there are government supported funding bodies in these countries, in lots of countries. But for the sake of the United States, you now have to find first money. It could be 10% of your budget, might be enough to trigger the rest of your budget. But you need to find an angel investor or some sort of a loan out company, or some kind of an investor to take that risk on that, whatever X amount of dollars gets you to the point where more people will take risks. And that's the harder part, because you need all these puzzle pieces. They need to all come together. And then if during pre-production or leading up to get the film made, one of those puzzle pieces goes, no, a recession hit and the money isn't there for us anymore, and it's too big of a risk for us, or the market has changed or whatever, and they walk away, some of those other puzzle pieces might go, okay, well, shit, we're going to walk away too. So it is very difficult, because it's not like I can say, well, just go to Universal and be like, listen, I want to make this movie. That does work for some people. People pitch. People get pitches. They can go in and do it. And sometimes they have an idea or a short or something that really catches the eye of someone, and then their stuff gets fast-tracked on the studio level. But on an independent level, at least for something with any kind of budget that didn't come from like your own pocket or your own credit cards or your family or, you know, whatever you crowdfunded or whatever, you need to convince someone to give you that first money using a business plan that shows you how the rest of the money would come together if that first money came in. So you go, okay, well, if you give us 20% of our $500,000 budget, we've already got 25% from this tax rebate, if there's a tax rebate available. And then you got this middle zone you've got to fill in. So you could get that filled in from a pre-sale with a distribution company if, of course, your film is appealing enough to be able to get a pre-sale, because that's, again, up on the higher level. It's very difficult to get a pre-sale on a movie that that has no name cast, or, you know, doesn't have obvious appeal like a named director or somebody, a company that you've already worked with, or somebody who will trust you with that money. So you got that middle zone to fill in. So the middle zone is generally, you can fill in with gap financiers. There's companies that exist strictly to lend you money against pre-sale paperwork. Like, so if somebody, let's say you sign on a sales company, there's companies that exist strictly to sell films. They're called sales companies. Let's say a sales company really likes your idea and your film, and they sign on, and they give you sales projections. This is what this movie can make internationally in all these different territories. It's literally a chart of just like every territory could sell to. Here's the low amount that we believe it'll make. Here's what the take amount, which is like, you know, what we'll sell it for. And here's the high if it overperforms, kind of thing. So if you've got those projections and you've got your first money, or even if you don't, if you got those projections and a solid package and a marketing plan and all those sort of things, it's really just knocking down every door you can with these things, and like to show that you understand the business behind the business and you understand how you're going to get this movie out there. And that gives people confidence to go, okay, I see where the money will come back. I see how long it's going to take to come back in the waterfall. That's what it's called, the return waterfall. I see how it'll come back, and I see the market for it is clearly there. I'll take this risk. There are investors who invest in movies specifically because they can get tax rebates on their investment, and they need to find places for lots of money so that they don't get taxed on it. There's a billion different directions you can go in. You know, Evil Dead was they way back in the day, they ran a fundraiser for dentists. You know, it could be anything. If you live in one of the countries where there's government funding, it's an application process. You need to meet certain criteria. For example, with Mark of Cain that we're supposed to shoot in Australia this summer, there's a 40% producers offset in Australia, which basically means any qualified Australian production set for theatrical within Australia will get 40% of their budget back from the government of Australia, which is pristine. It almost dropped to 30% on July 1st, and then a bunch of people lobbied, including Brian Brown from the FX movies, lobbied and kept the 40% rate. Then depending on the zone you shoot in Australia, you know, Queensland or Sydney or wherever else, there's Screen Queensland. There's all these different sort of area-based funding bodies that you can get additional percentage of your budget out of. And then there's reinvestment structures you can do where you know, anyway, I'm getting way too technical. But ultimately, our first money on Mark of Cain is we partnered with a sales company who we can't name right now publicly, and we partnered with a post-production financing company to finance our post-production. So we've got essentially 6 puzzle pieces at this point. We have a sales company, we have a post-production financer, we have the producer's offset, we have Screen Australia, and like all these specific things that go into what the package is to raise the money to make this movie. If it's a super duper tiny indie movie, like something $100,000 or smaller or whatever, you could potentially just raise that money out of your circle of people. But just keep in mind that there's no guarantee that money's coming back. So like if it's your family or your close friends and you burn them, that can actually ruin a relationship with somebody. So you got to be really careful with that sort of thing. And then there's the super micro budget level where, you know, you can use an iPhone or you can buy a cheap DSLR or whatever it is and just go out and do it yourself for a few $1,000. Like the guys that did The Battery did. I think their movie was $5,000 to get it done. Yeah. It probably costs more than that to get it released though, because, you know, just E&O insurance alone is like $4,000 and you need errors and omissions insurance to sell it anywhere. So ultimately, I'm rambling on too long here, but ultimately,
I think it's gold. And I think you've answered about like 4 questions here.
Okay, good. Ultimately, ultimately, it's about thinking about where all the different pockets of money could come from, realizing the money that exists as last money, which means money that comes in after you've already got other finance committed, and gap financiers are often last money too. They want it. If they'll put in their 20%, but they want a premium on that 20%, and they want their money back first. So then you have to convince your first money, are you okay with sitting in second position? And then first money needs to go, will the movie make enough money back for me to see anything? And then that could ruin you too. So it's such a weird sort of position to be in. There are definitely sales companies and distribution companies that can greenlight your movies. If MPI or somebody like that likes your pitch enough, and the budget's right, they may be able to help you put together. I don't mean to call them out specifically, but like there's certain sales companies that, if it's the right project, they can just go, okay, yeah, we'll definitely make this. And streaming platforms are the same. You pitch to something to Netflix, you could get 130% of your budget covered before you shoot a frame. That's possible. Shutter's similar for little smaller stuff, but ultimately, it's a puzzle, and you just have to sort of figure out who the pieces are and fit them all together, and then hope none of them walk away before you go to camera or during when you're shooting, because that can happen too, or during post-production.
So this leads really nicely into another question we've had from Ace on social media, asking if you're doing a micro budget feature, what are the different gaps? What are the different spaces within that budget that people should be aiming for? What are the... You mean
how much money they should spend? Or
yeah, for like different sizes, what they should be aiming for, what they should try and target.
Honestly, it's really hard to say, because when you're in the micro budget range of films, it can go one of three ways. It could be something that you've created that's actually really good and breaks out and does good business, and you see a return. It could be something where it just kind of floats in the market and some people notice it and some people don't, or it could be a complete disaster that either you fucked up or the market wasn't ready for, and you never make any money back at all. So I can't put a dollar amount on it specifically, but what I can say, at least from my experience, what I can say is that if it's like a personal film that you're making that you think it doesn't really have a huge audience, but it's something you just have to get out. Like some of Sam's work is a good example of this, because the Frankenstein's creature and stuff like that, there's a very niche audience for something like that. Mm-hmm. It's good, but it's niche. It's not something you could show to like your grandma or, a casual who likes to watch Parks and Recreation episodes on The Office all the time. That's not going to appeal to them. So if you're making something personal like that, that's really like, you have to keep that budget as low as possible, no matter what, because the chances of you making a proper return into the market with something like that is, I'm not going to say it's impossible, because it's not. There's always exceptions, but the majority of films like that, you're making that as a piece to prove who you are, and not necessarily a piece to make money. The slightly larger, like if you're making something a little more commercial with a micro budget, I think you just have to be smart and realize that, like with good distribution and good sales agents, and you've made a good movie, you can make from the market right now on a micro budget, like a tiny movie, anything between $50,000 and $250,000, give or take. But that's a big range, right? So if you make $100,000 movie and you make $50,000 back, you need to be prepared that you're not making all your money back. That can be a bitter pill to swallow. But you kind of have to hedge your bets too. So if you're making something more commercially targeted, I think Andrew Vandenhouten put it really good in the documentary. Whatever is the lowest amount of budget for the highest quality of project is your best foot forward. You really can't rely on you making your money back necessarily, and everybody knows that. But I guess I could use Life Changer as a case study. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but the budget on Life Changer, I don't know if I should be honest about that, because I feel like my distributors will be like, I'm going to fucking kill you. We're still selling this thing.
I can be honest.
Use letters of the alphabet.
Okay. Well, the point is the budget for Life Changer is really, really low. Ultimately, it looks like it costs a little more, but it's low. It's It's like $210,000 Canadian. It's tiny. It's a tiny movie. Ultimately, but it punched above its weight, and it ended up on Netflix, and it's on Shudder in the UK, and it's on all these things. So it's in a decent place financially. But that range still holds true for something like that too. Whereas, you could make something that really explodes, like The Endless, which probably cost, again, I can't speak specifics in terms of numbers because it's not right. The point is that whatever's the lowest budget you can afford to lose all of is the budget you should be producing on, unless you already have sales agents on board or somebody on board who can tell you that, okay, yes, it'll probably make this amount back. At least that way, the investors, you can tell the investors, well, the projections were healthy, so I don't know what happened. You know, I don't mean like you're not trying to screw with the investors, but at the same time, you do not want to be left holding the bag either. So
play with someone else's maths. Yeah.
Well, it's not someone else's mess. It's just the more you can come to a pitch and try and raise the money with enough ammo to sort of show that you've done the due diligence and the homework to at least secure their money, the better off you're going to be. Like it's hard. Don't fly blind into things. And it honestly, I don't even know if I've got that completely down on lock at this point. It's impossible to know because the market changes so much. It fluctuates like crazy. So like what might have been a sure thing a year ago might be just something nobody's looking for now. And when it comes to international sales and like, you know, specific stuff won't sell to Germany. China won't buy specific stuff. They won't buy stuff with ghosts in it. Like there's stuff that you need to know about international territories because that'll cut a whole chunk of your revenue out of the eventual waterfall.
Is that true? Does China not like ghosts?
Well, yeah, they don't buy ghost movies. There's a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I don't know if that's changed, but like within the last, and not only that, if you sell a film to China, it could take as much as 2 years to make it through censorship. Like we sold Broken Mile sold to China. Life Changer sold to China, but by the time we actually had a signed contract for say Broken Mile, it was like a year and a half after the sale happened, like because it took that long to make it through their censorship board, because there's a backlog of films trying to make it through. All these sort of little things are things you kind of can only really learn by asking questions and talking to people and going out and doing it to some degree. I don't think there's a sure thing. There's no sure formula for anything. But you can at least know that you did the work to protect the investment, at least to some degree, and don't overspend because with the indie business the way it is right now, it's more likely you'll lose your money than get it back, and that's just a sad truth.
Yeah, but I will say, you know, do take some kind of personal artistic risk because to use Frankenstein's creature as an example. Brought it up, and I think it's kind of a useful example for people asking these questions. It cost £2,200. We shot it in a day. It had one actor, so you know he got paid. The crew got paid, and it's a crazy weird film, but it played Fright Fest, and then got distribution on DVD where they did a limited edition run of 200 copies, and they sold out in pre-orders. So you know, you can make these as long as you keep that budget tiny.
Yeah.
You know, you can make these kind of personal films and get them out there. And I just want to see as many films like, you know, Frankenstein's Creature and to a much higher extent, Life Changer, because I feel like that's a personal.
It is a personal film, but I was also playing with investors' money, right? So it was. Even at that low budget, I mean, that is a low budget. Even at that low budget, I still had to think about, okay, how will we be able to sell this? What can we put in this to, you know, make it palpable to Japan and make it palpable to whoever else, you know, that without those sellable, you know, when Uncorked decided to pay for half the movie, it wasn't necessarily about the story they were signing on for. It was like, okay, well, tell me about the effects. Tell me about and it was like, well, we have great practical effects people. There's this. I'm not going to spoil it, but anyway, the point being is that it was all about the sellable elements that he knew he can monetize and not necessarily the story, because the story is an abstract. The idea and concept is monetizable. The actual nitty gritty of the story is not monetizable. Mm-hmm. But if you execute it poorly, it hurts your bottom line. But then again, you could also execute it incredibly and still not make the money anyway. So, I wish I had a bet, but definitely a great example there, Sam, of like with a personal film, like if it's cost less than 10 grand, you're probably safe. Like you probably can make that money back without too much trouble, provided you actually take the time and effort to exploit things. But a lot of companies, again, you're not going to be able to put it out without a title report and errors and emissions insurance. So that alone is like, well, at least $4,500 just for that, just to get it out there. Certain places won't take it without a QC report. China, again, is another example where they won't buy a film unless it's got a 4K master. So
right, yeah.
There's specific stuff you kind of need to know going forward.
Yeah. Dan?
I mean, that's insane. I feel like you just do an export of 4K of whatever you shot on.
Well, yeah,
just send it over to the Chinese.
You could do an up convert and hope for the best. But
yeah,
but I
just
feel
cross your fingers. No one's going to check.
I feel like with the year and a half it takes to get through censorship, if they also fail you on the QC, the quality control, it's like you're fucked.
I would just say that I love Frankenstein's Creature, and I am currently rewatching all of Parks and Rec. So
Hey. And to answer Nathaniel's question, it's on Hex Media's website. You can download it, and there's a couple of commentaries on there as well. Right, I'm not selling my movie. I'm selling your movie, Justin.
Yeah, Hex Media is a great example of like a mini studio, basically, that's really figured out how to monetize and get their brand out there and keep making stuff constantly. Like, I gotta give it out for them, man. I respect that a lot. And they have an audience. They've built an audience, and that's even covered in the documentary and the series too. The idea that you're not just selling your film anymore. You're sort of selling your entire oeuvre, I guess, your entire whatever. You're a brand now, which is, it is what it is. But you kind of have to sell yourself. You have to sell your personality. You have to sell what is behind what gets made. People engage with that. It's and not do it cynically, which is the really hard part. You can't like weaponize your personality and hope that people glom onto it.
That's it. There was a film like motivational speaker called Dov Simmons who used to do the circuit years ago. You remember Dov?
Yeah, I watched it. Yep.
And he used to talk about have that one anecdote about getting your movie made because that's marketing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cynical version, but yeah, you're right. It's ultimately, I guess, it's that you care about the project, and then hopefully that'll shine through. I guess we're kind of running out of time, so we have to ask you one last question, which is the question that we ask everyone. Although in this instance, it was posed by a member of our audience, Seth. If you could choose any underappreciated or much loved cult film, what would you like to see Arrow release? What do you want to get see the Arrow? What do you want to see get the Arrow treatment?
Well, there's two movies, and one of them they're actually putting on the Arrow Player next month. Sion Sono's Love and Peace, which is on the Arrow Player next month. That is now a staple Christmas watch for me. I watch it every year at Christmas. I imported the 88 Films release, and we programmed it at I programmed for Toronto After Dark. We programmed it at Toronto After Dark a few years ago, and it didn't get a proper release in North America, and it was barely released anywhere else. It's a fucking incredible movie. It's so goddamn good, and it's a Christmas movie in a dark, weird kind of way. Yeah, that one for sure. So that's coming to the Arrow Player next month, so you can check that out. I think it's only going there in the UK, but I don't know for sure. But the other one, which what? Yeah, the other movie that I'm actually super surprised hasn't had a proper home video release outside of Australia is Bad Boy Bubby, which is Wolf Hur's film. I've never been more uncomfortable and more enthralled by a film in my life than that one. It is. I would love to see it sit in an audience of unsuspecting people and watch them react to the first hour and then be completely elated by the second hour. I don't think there's another film like it out there. There's a great Blu-ray and it's region free, available from Umbrella Entertainment right now. Even though it's marked region B, it's a region free disc. I literally got it in the mail today. It's great, but I would love to see an Arrow release of that film. That would be incredible. It's not a horror film, but it's pretty fucking horrific. And
emotionally, it's a horror film.
Oh yeah, it's definitely emotionally. It's basically that movie Room from a few years ago, but way more fucked up. Yeah. It's great. It's a great film. It really is. I could go on. There's so many. Duh. I've been trying to get John McNaughton's The Borrower released on some form of physical media for over a decade. I
have that on Laserdisc.
Yeah, I started with
Does that
Anchor
count?
Bay. Yeah, I started with Anchor Bay when I was working with them. I tried to get them to put it out, and then I tried with Screen Factory, and then I tried with Arrow. The problem is that it's in the Warner Vault. So it was a Canon film, and when Canon fell apart, it divided out. Part of their catalog went to MGM, and those movies actually got releases, and part of their catalog went to Warner. And Warner has sat on a ton of Canon titles, including The Borrower. And I know that there's a pristine print out there, and John McNaughton's got all kinds of additional material. And it's such a practical effects extravaganza, and it's a really fun movie, and it definitely influenced Life Changer to some degree. And it's like you can watch it on YouTube right now. That's about it. Like a VHS rip from YouTube.
Yeah.
So it really needs a new resurrection. I'd love for it to happen, but it's tough to get anything out of the Warner Vault. Although didn't Warner just announce they're spooling down their physical media production, so maybe they'll start licensing stuff again? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like an opportunity for Arrow. Maybe we'll see a
potentially. Hopefully.
Disc set soon.
Yep.
Man, well, Justin, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on there. And I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. Feel free to reach out to me on social media, and I'll try and get back to you. Be patient, I guess. I've got a busy week.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
thank you, man.
Thanks a lot.
And we're going to end on a clip. SFX talking about.
Oh, okay. Yep. Got it.
So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Bye.
A camera has been prototyped and tested and worked, and everything's fantastic. You plug it in, you switch it on. You move the lights around, it's going to work every single time. The severed hand gag, or the disemboweling gag that's been created for your movie, was built once, hasn't really been tested that well, and God knows what it's going to do on camera. So the best advice I can give to anybody starting, who wants to incorporate prosthetics into their production is, insist on camera tests. Like, have somebody film it working before they bring it to set.
Be careful that you have a good stunt coordinator. The thing about stunts is you can get hurt.
One of my tricks that I at least try is to have a second unit that I trust that takes care of special makeup effects, takes care of stunts, takes care of any sort of practical special effects. Just because it's, my AD calls it a time vampire. These things are time vampires, and time is the most precious commodity that we have.
John Landis once said to me, he said, a director's job is to listen to everybody's opinion and then make yours. So if you're going to hire any prosthetics guy, make sure, especially somebody more experienced like myself, listen to what they have to say. Don't come in with, well, I need this from you, and that's it.
I think the consideration is largely overlooked, because if you're sitting in a trailer and you're doing a makeup on somebody, and an AD or an assistant comes in, how long is it going to take? You say half an hour, and then they come in 5 minutes later. I told you, half an hour. It's going to take and they keep coming in, trying to get you to the set.
So if you hire me 2 days before you start shooting, I only get 48 hours to build something. I know it seems obvious, but I'm finding with more and more projects, regardless of the budget, that the preparation part is being cut shorter and shorter and shorter.
Are we ready? Okay, you ready, Justin? I'm ready out here. Action!